party. Doing a day hike from the New Fork Trailhead. Well, welcome to another adventure or misadventure, as the case may be. We're at the Elkhart Park Trailhead, and we're headed into the Wind River Range for a 7-night backpacking trip. Our first stop is Mary's Lake. We have hired a horse to carry most of our gear and food to Mary's Lake to give us a first easy day as we acclimate to the elevation. We're starting about 9,000 feet and headed up to 10. So I've been super nervous today about getting started on this trip. Worried about having enough food to eat. Worried about sunscreen not working and getting burned. Just always nerves at the beginning of a trip. But worried about altitude. But so far so good. Try to ease myself into the trail.
How you doing?
Good. So we're doing these switchbacks climbing up off the lake, and each one gets a better view of Mount Fremont and the whole range in the back. Well, we made it to Mary's Lake, and our bags are here. So tent's all set up, and it looks like a tent. It's set up nicely. Michael's set up too. Let me show you what that looks like. So in the hotel, they have these packets of sugar and creamer, and in a move of total panic, as we left the hotel room, I grabbed a bunch of these. Just panic about not having enough on the trail. So now I've got to pack out all this garbage. I'm going to use the sugar, but I'm not going to use the creamer or the sugar light, the sugar substitute. Cold coffee. Not bad. And tastes good. Anything wet would taste good right now. Easy breaststroking, but really hard to
But I wouldn't call it warm. It's not icy.
Maybe we have neighbors, but they saw us and they talked about moving on. So I don't know.
Yeah, I heard someone say we don't need the whole lake or something.
That was me that said that.
You're welcome to join us.
Yeah. Nice dry air and the sun and a little bit of breeze. It won't be dry in no time.
I was out with Kenny, the guy Kenny once, and we caught these fish called false albacore. It's kind of like a tuna.
So this is either our last day or our second to last day. This is Saturday, day 8. We're hiking on the trail out, or we'll stop if Michael gets tired, maybe at Seneca Lake. So I'm gonna try to summarize the trip. So day 1, we hiked in to Mary's Lake. We didn't have our packs. Well, we had our packs, but we had most of the gear on the horses, so it was an easy carry uphill into the winds. Good morning. It's day 3. Day 2 was a disaster because I had a work issue, so I hiked out to Pinedale and resolved it and came back. So Michael hung around Mary's Lake and we spent another day at Mary's Lake. And now we're ready to move on from Mary's Lake, head toward Pole Creek Lake and possibly all the way to Cook's Lake. We'll see how far we get. We'll have very full packs with 7 days of food, and I'm looking forward to hitting the trail and seeing what's next. We're making our way along the Pole Creek Trail. It's a nice morning. The next day that would be day 3, we continued on the Pole Creek Trail, past Pole Creek Lake, across a big water crossing, and on up to all the way to Cook Lake, where we found a great spot on the peninsula. On the way to Cook Lake, right after the water crossing, about 3/4 of a mile after the water crossing, Michael noticed that he had left his camera back somewhere, probably on one side of the water crossing. So I dropped my pack, grabbed my water shoes and one of Michael's hiking poles, and went back, asking everyone I met on the trail whether they had seen his camera. One of the young people in a small group had seen it and remembered seeing it on the other side of the water crossing. So that made it easy for me because I didn't have to look along the way. I could just go back to the water crossing, cross the river, and lo and behold, there was the camera. So I got the camera, used my phone to take a selfie, coming back across the river, and then caught back up with Michael, and we went on to Cook Lake. Mission accomplished. Got the camera, now back across the river. I love this. Yay! So we made it to Cook Lake. Found a 1 in a million campsite nestled on a peninsula in Cook Lake, Lower Cook Lake, and I'm going to try to clean off a bit. Lower Cook Lake. We're on a peninsula, and there's our tents back there. 360-degree views. How's that for a campsite? So we're walking away from Upper Cook Lake, headed toward Wall Lake, and it looks like we're walking into a dead end because there are just mountains in front of us. It doesn't look like there's any way out of them. Our most ambitious day so far of the trip, which was we were going to try to tackle Wall Lake, which is off trail and has some difficult parts to the trail. There's a noted slab traverse that is notable. So Michael was not sure he could do it, but he wanted to try. And so we made our way from Cook Lake to Wall Lake, up a drainage. And as we came into Wall Lake, we were in the backcountry part of the winds that I find most appealing, the alpine zone, where there are no trees and stark mountain profiles and just beautiful terrain. So we're at Wall Lake. Got to be the most beautiful flower area I've ever seen. We're working our way along Wall Lake on the right side, climber's right, headed up to the top of it. Our first snow of the trip. Rain. So, getting to Wall Lake was a big success and a big part of the trip that I was happy that we could accomplish. We got up to the slab traverse, and I went up the slab. Oh, before going up the slab, I looked at what looked like a chute, but I didn't know where the chute went. So I didn't take it. Instead, I took the slab and went up to the top, and then I could see that the slab went to the same place as the chute did. So I came back down, I left my pack at the top, came back down the chute, and led Michael up the chute, which was a lot less scary than the slab. So we were successfully through the crux, and the rest was pretty easy on Wall Lake. The sun was hot, beating down. We got to the top of Wall Lake, which was our destination and potential spot for a campsite, and we stumbled across a beautiful campsite with a fire ring, which we didn't use, and a beautiful grass bed to put up our tents. So we made it to our campsite and set up camp, and now it's time to cool off. The sun is relentless. It's really beating down, and I'm very hot, so this water is going to be cold, but it should feel good. Well, there was a channel in the middle of it that was maybe deep over my head, but it was only maybe a few feet wide, not very big. Most of it looks like it's like 2 feet deep, but water's clear, felt good. So we had the whole lake to ourselves. There's our camp at Wall Lake. This type of terrain in the winds is my favorite type of hiking. The rocks are just so amazing. The flowers are amazing. The water does such fantastical things. I think maybe that's the wall. We're going to go follow that stream there up onto the mountain edge, and then turn and go to that pass. Bad weather set in. It was rainy, rained all night. Everything wet. Next day, the question is, do we push on or stay another day at Wall Lake? We decided to push on up the second part of the second most challenging part of the trip, which was trying to do the pass to Wall Lake, which was a climb that Michael was not sure he could do. And so it was a real challenge. But we started out and went slowly, and Michael was able to, stop and breathe and fire himself up and make it all the way up the pass. As we got almost to the top of the pass from Wall Lake, we encountered a big snow patch with boulders on both sides. So we had to figure out how to go around it or over it. I started over it, and Michael called me back because he didn't want to do the snow, which is probably better because it's a little slippery. So I dropped my pack and scouted to the left, climber's left, and found a way up, but it was a little difficult climbing. So I came back, and Michael pointed to the other side, said that looked better. And from the left side, climbers left. The right side did look better. So I went back down and went over to the right side to scout. And it turned out that not only was there a pretty easy climbing route, but the snow had receded from the sides of the boulders, and there was a narrow path between the snow and the mountain. So we tried that and squeezed up and to the top of the pass. Squeezed right here. Crazy.
Looking good up there.
Yeah. A little bit of bouldering, but we got to the top of the pass and started heading down toward Island Lake. We had the idea of camping at one of the ponds that were about a half mile down from the pass. But right after we got over the pass, we encountered 3 people. One of which was Lane from Lane's World. So I'm here and I ran into Lane from Lane's World.
Yeah. Hey,
All
Tim.
right. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too, man.
And I had a conversation with Lane, and he said that he had camped at the ponds, and there were not great sights there. It was just a place to put your tent, but nothing special. In his words, not really any place to hang your hat. So, as Michael and I headed down and encountered some beautiful flat flower beds, we said, hey, why not camp here instead of going all the way down to the pond? So that's what we did. And we camped right on the flowers on the slopes below the col, and it was a beautiful campsite. Although the rain and the chill did put a damper on it. The next morning, we set out with the idea of following Nancy Pallister's route through the pass over to Indian Basin. it was easy hiking, just about as easy an off-trail experience as you can have, until we got to the lake at the top. And there was some bouldering, but still pretty easy, nice travel, not beautiful off-trail travel, not much elevation, very a nice route. We made our way around the pond and came to a big surprise that there was a huge drop-off, maybe 200 feet, 100, 200 feet down off of the far end of the big lake between the Wall Lake Pass start and the Indian Basin. I wasn't sure Michael wanted to do it because it was a lot of climbing, and he was not crazy about that. But I dropped my pack. I went to do number 2 and found a great campsite in the process, and suggested perhaps stopping at that lake. We would have had it all to ourselves. Great campsite. But Michael wanted to push on. He wanted to get back to Indian Basin. He wanted to be on trail again after this being our 3rd day off trail. So we route found down that little gully and back up the other side, and the weather was not cooperating. It was starting to rain and threatening worse, but we rounded this little pond at the top of the gully and started down the channel, the drainage, into the lake 10813, which is in Indian Basin. That was more challenging route finding because it was quite a river and you didn't want to wade in it, and it was pretty fast moving, and there were boulders and rocks and cliff walls on both sides, so you had to find a route that didn't get too close to the water. So several times I dropped my pack and would scout for the route, and it turned out that staying to our left on the left side as we continued toward Indian Basin, and going up maybe 50, 100 feet above the drainage, turned out to be the right strategy for getting through it and getting to Indian Basin. As we got to Indian Basin, the campsite that we'd stayed at in 2019 was across the lake, 10813. But since it was already starting to rain, we decided to set up on this little peninsula in the lake. And I'm so glad we did, because not only was it great sights, but it was a better view of Fremont, Harrower, and Elephant Head, I think, than the other side that we'd camped previously. So the next morning, it was raining. And the question is, do we move on or spend another day in Indian Basin? Again, we decided to move on and try to get to Island Lake. So we packed up and had quite a bit of trouble getting up out of Lake 813 onto the trail because it's pretty steep and pretty gnarly. So Michael was suffering, and we were cold and wet already. And then we had a very short distance to Island Lake, but it still took us 3 hours total to get there from our campsite. So it was a lot of stop and go. I never got enough speed going to warm up, so we arrived pretty cold and wet and set up camp in a little meadow right near the trail. As it turns out, it was too near the trail, because after we were set up, rangers came by and said we had to move. We had spoken to a couple of women that were camped near us, and the ranger made them move too, so we invited them to come up on the bluff that we had moved to. So we had 3 tents up on our bluff with now a view of the lake, which was nice. And it was cold and rainy. It stopped a little bit in the evening, so we cooked dinner. But then by 8:30 we were back in our tents because it was so cold. Got up this morning and there was ice on our tents, so the temperatures dropped during the night, but fortunately the rain had cleared and now we have a nice sunny morning to do some hiking. That's a pretty good view of Mount Fremont, and you can see the saddle where the sun is hitting it. And then there's a pretty straight chute right up to the top that I hiked 4 years ago. In the trip, I have watched Michael psych himself up to accomplish his goals and succeed in finding the energy and the willpower to accomplish an incredible trip through beautiful area in the winds. So I'm really proud of him, respect him for his ability to push through and really make this trip a wonderful exploration without having to have 3,000-foot days or 10-mile days, but just little by little pushing through to some beautiful areas and really enjoying the winds. So thank you, Michael, for making this trip such a success. So we're coming off of Lake Seneca and into the trees. This is the part of the winds where you're allowed to have campfires because you're below what is considered tree line. And it's a different feel. It's a forest feel instead of a mountain feel. Smell of pine trees. Sunshine is holding up, but there are some clouds in the sky, and the weather is predicted to thunderstorm later this afternoon. Okay, we made it to Hobbs Lake, our final campsite, and I'm going to try to get wet because the thunderstorms keep threatening, but the sun's hot between the clouds, so I want to cool off. So that felt good, and I'm cleaner and cooler, and I put on a cleanish shirt. It's as clean as it gets in cold water, no soap. Clean underwear, also cold water, no soap. And I feel a lot better. I washed my underwear and socks in the lake, and we'll dry them out and go back to camp and relax for the rest of the last evening here in the winds. Site with a view of Fremont. Well, I hate to say goodbye to the winds. It's been a great trip. Met all our goals. Did an incredible loop with 3 days of off trail. Thank you, Michael. Great adventure. Hey, I see the sun. Well, we're not getting out of this adventure dry, but we may get out without getting more wet.
At the top of our lungs, you got to say it. Ready?
All right.
1, 2, 3.
What a hike!